On today's podcast, we're talking about the difference between producing and winning and the characteristics that rise to the surface on winning teams and in winning cultures.
Welcome back to the Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world.
Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast, wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today. Welcome in. So glad you are here. We continue to march along. We are in Season 8, well over 230, maybe pushing 240 episodes by now. I'm losing track. But so glad you are here, and so much great stuff. So if you're new to the podcast, welcome. So glad you're here. Glad you found it. Glad you somebody recommended it or however you got to the podcast. Hope you'll go back, check out so many great micropods, topics I know that if you're drawn to this podcast that you will be interested in. And also some great chats with some amazing thought leaders from around the world. So hope you go back and check it out. If you are one of the OGs that have been with us from the very beginning, so glad you're back. So glad this continues to add value to your life and your work. My commitment, as always, is I want this to be a place for you to step back, for you to take a deep breath, for you to think about your life, your work, all the important things in your life, and think about the temperature that you're trying to set, the culture that you're trying to create with the people around you. And then also to hopefully that this is a place that breathes a little good oxygen into you and helps you think about the road ahead. So that's my commitment to you, and I'm so glad that you are here. Before we dive into today's episode, if you'll do me the quick favor, if you will, if any of this resonates with you, or you're drawn to these topics, or you think this adds any redeeming value in the world, if you'll do me the quick favor and rate the podcast 5 stars on whatever platform you're on, if you'll leave an authentic review in your own words, saying why you think this is a good topic or the podcast has redeeming value in the world and ought to be, shared with more, then say that. And I appreciate in your own words anybody that leaves that authentic kind of review. And then, of course, thanks to everybody who just shares the podcast. Whether that's on social media or with your colleagues or your team at work, and say, hey, let's listen to this episode and then let's talk about it. All of those ways are ways in which this podcast and these messages spread, and the whole purpose is to amplify these messages in the world. So thanks to everybody that takes a moment to do that. I very much appreciate it. What's the difference between producing and winning? What's the difference between producing and winning? We've all been on or observed teams that have had people who have produced good results. Maybe in a sports situation, they are somebody who's always put up good statistics, but their team never seemed to win. We've also all been on, or at least observed, teams that had people on them that didn't seem to blow people out of the water with their skill or their talent or even their statistics. But their teams always seemed to win. Perhaps there are significant nuances that differentiate people and teams who win from those who merely produce. So, on today's podcast, we're talking about the difference between producing and winning and the characteristics that rise to the surface on winning teams and in winning cultures. But before we dive into today's topic, let's pause, take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. Many of you know that basketball has always been important to me, and I love the sport. I think it's a beautiful game. Many of you know that. You've listened to past pods that I've referenced that or told some stories on or connected with other athletes on this podcast for sure. But I love the game. I think it's beautiful. I played in high school. I played in small college. I think there's many valuable lessons, and I think it's a powerful example of many things that I talk about, on this podcast, and certainly applicable to leadership and culture and clarity around mission, vision, and values. So, when I remember this as a young guy, when of course I grew up loving the game and going to camps, and from very early age loved playing the game. But I remember in 8th grade in particular, and by the way, the Jason Barger in 8th grade was, I don't know what I weighed, but I was a skinny little punk. And I soaking wet, with keys in my pocket. I didn't weigh much. So, but I remember in 8th grade, an eager little guy wanting to play basketball, that my parents dropping me off, I would ask them, hey, drop me off over at the high school gym. And even though I was still only in middle school, drop me off at the high school gym for their open gyms. And there were a few years in there or around the area where I grew up, there were some of the most talented players in the city, and some high major college players, and a few highly rated, high school players that were being recruited by almost every college in America were coming to play and be a part of these open gyms. So it was a great environment to learn, to grow, and to develop. And one of the I would get thrown into games or hang around enough and make friends with some of the older guys that were so good to me and would give me a chance and throw me in there. And so I got to play, early on when I certainly physically I wasn't developed enough, but was learning the skill and the pace and watching the way that all these players competed with each other. And one of the things I noticed early on, as I watched all these open gym games taking place, one of the things I noticed early on was that the most talented, skilled, and even some of the as you walked in the gym and you'd look around and you could point out some of the most talented players, and there were some guys that were 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", 6'11", super skilled and talented. Again, some being recruited by every college in America that were in the gym. But yet you'd watch them, and why is it that their teams didn't always win? They were the ones that everybody, if you stopped and everybody said, okay, who's the most talented person in this gym? And people would point, and there'd be a couple people that people clearly would have picked. But yet their teams didn't always seem to win. And yet there was a group of older players who definitely weren't as quote-unquote talented, and certainly not as desired, but they always seemed to stay on the winners' courts.
And as I grew as a high school player and a college player, I continued to notice that there was a significant difference between players who produced stats and players who seemed to win. And that was always something I was interested in, is I didn't want to just be a player that produced stats. I wanted to be the one on the winner's court. I wanted to, with the people that I was put together with, the goal was to try to figure out how did we play at our optimal level together and win. That was the goal, not just looking good and or scoring the most points or whatever the statistic was. And so this has always been true in sports for sure, but well beyond sports is now, as I look at it through the lens of my entire professional career. My entire professional career, this has absolutely been true, but especially over the last 16 years, as I've been in this world of speaking and consulting with many teams and organizations across industries, working with leadership teams and helping shape culture. All of these experiences I've had over the last 16 years with so many, many brands that you all would recognize and get recognized for being amazing cultures and amazing teams. But I've watched teams that win, that quote unquote win, and players that seem to bring out the best in themselves and those around them. And I've also seen players that just produced stats. Teams that just produce but don't necessarily, quote unquote, win. Now, we can spend way more time defining what we mean by winning, but in fact, I did a whole podcast on the topic of defining winning cultures. So you can go back and I encourage you to go back and give that a listen. So I don't want to repeat that same episode, but for now, the way we're talking about winning is a winning teammate, and a winning team are teammates that bring out the best in others, and teams that win, that have results that are greater than the sum of their parts. And so, again, not just producing, but are we winning? Are we growing? Are we developing? Are people excited to continue to be a part of that team? And are we attracting more people that want to be a part of that? And are our results following, rather than just a quote-unquote individual producer? So, again, if you like sports analogies, and especially if you like basketball analogies, I mean, the NBA Finals just finished recently, and it played out. This example played out right in front of our faces, that the Boston Celtics won the NBA championship, and they have some amazing superstar players that are great superstar players that do many of the things that I'm talking about on this podcast. But Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, as soon as the finals ended, they got celebrated, and there was a big debate about, because they're both superstars, they got a lot of attention, and there was a big debate about which one of them was the most valuable player. And rightfully so, there's all this talk and admiration for them. But if you watch the series, the two of them were absolutely special and important to them winning. But the Celtics didn't win the championship, and they would not have won the championship without a couple of key players. Drew Holiday and Derek White. If they weren't on that roster, I don't think the Celtics win the NBA championship. And in fact, as the series was beginning, some of you know, and he's a legendary NBA champion, but he's also been a podcast guest of mine a number of times. A friend of mine, Shane Battier, he and I were texting together as the NBA finals was beginning, and I said, "Hey, who's going to be the Shane Battier of this series?" Meaning he was one of those players that in the NBA finals, he showed up and produced in a way and was that kind of winning teammate that made all these huge plays that people wouldn't have predicted before the series, although those of us that know him probably would have. But then he helped the Miami Heat win the championship. So I said, who's going to be that kind of player? And without hesitation, he came back and he said, Derek White just makes winning plays. And so if you watch this, and again, not just about basketball, but as I'm extending it to thinking about the players on our teams and other teammates, what are the winning characteristics of teammates that seem to make the sum of the parts better? And so these aren't the only things, but 4 observations and characteristics of winning teammates that came to my mind quickly. One is they are dependable. And certainly Drew Holiday and Derek White are examples on a basketball court of all these things I'm going to describe. But again, I want us to think about the people within your team or your organization, the people that also have these characteristics. So winning teammates are dependable. They're consistent. They show up night in and night out. It isn't a roller coaster of with them. You see that they are always reliable, dependable. They are there. They also do the little things. Again, the little things. They aren't always the one to make the big, splashy, flashy play, but each possession, the defense they play, that every single time there's a loose ball, they seem to be the one first to the floor, first to get to it. They're the one to make the extra pass, the unselfish play. They do the little things that lead to winning results. They seem to have a mindset of we, not me. We, not me. Their mindset from the very beginning seems to be programmed that it's always about the team first, the unit. The goal is how they play best together, not just how they play individually. It doesn't start with a posture of me playing just me and how I play. It's how do we play best together, and I am a piece of that puzzle. And the 4th observation or characteristic of winning teammates I'd point out is their effort and their timing. You watch these kind of players and these kind of teammates, and the effort, not only are they consistent and they show up night in and night out, but the effort never seems to wane. They give the same effort no matter what time in the game or what time in the day it is. And when the timing of these people, when the biggest plays or the biggest challenges or obstacles seem to emerge, which in every game is certainly true, but also when we think about our careers, when we think about our projects, when we think about our businesses or our organizations, there are times when things arise where we need our very best, and it's in those moments that these kind of players always seem to be able to focus in and bring their best in the biggest moments. The team's focus and the teammates' focus is about the culture of how they play together and how they coach, teach, and they develop this kind of thinking, acting, and interacting. It matters. And the best teams, the best leaders, the best organizations, they know this, and they believe that it is their leaders and the teams and their places of employment are an opportunity to shift and shape this mindset and raise the bar on how we show up to our work and what approach that we're going to take, and that we are all co-creators and participants in creating the culture we want to be a part of. But is the mindset to just be a producer, or is the mindset to be a winning teammate and a part of a winning team? So, as always, I want to leave you with some questions to ponder. What do winning actions look like on your team? If you had to define or describe what winning actions look like on your team, how would you articulate it? What could you do to help cultivate a mindset of winning together rather than just producing individually? I hope today's episode got you thinking in some good ways. I appreciate everything that we're talking about here today, and I hope it gave you some oxygen. I hope that we have, gratitude for the fact that of all the things in the world that are out of our control, the things that are within our control is how we show up to each other, our mindset, our thinking, acting, and interacting is all a part of that co-creation of the culture that we are shaping. So I hope that you'll continue to tune in. If any of this resonated with you, I pray and I hope that you will share it with other people, that you will, if you have a thought or if you think of ways in which we could be more helpful to you, I hope you'll follow up info@jasonvbarger.com. You can email info@jasonvbarger.com or just track us down through the jasonvbarger.com website. Again, I hope this was helpful to you. I hope you go back and check out past episodes. Again, rate it 5 stars, share your authentic reviews, share the episodes with other people. That's the way that this continues to spread. So thank you for being a part of today. Remember, the future of leadership and culture is you, is me, is us. We have an opportunity to get clear on the temperature we're trying to set, and then the courage to continue to breathe oxygen into ourselves and others so that we can create that culture that we're trying to create. Remember, the best leaders, teams, and cultures stimulate progress by recalibrating that thermostat together. Step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.